Stand and try.
Oh, that's really nice. Thank you, John Catsimatidis.
This is Dick Ravitch.
Hey, Tom Cole. Nice to see you.
I was hoping to say hello to him as well.
And my daughter is GOP chair for Manhattan.
A lot tougher job than me.
Absolutely. Hi, guys. Hi. John Catsimatidis.
Oh, hi. Give you a hug. Good to see you. Everything's great. How's Margot?
Good seeing you.
Nice to meet you.
How are you?
John, Frank Delafair, we met.
Yes, yes. How are you doing? Hello, guys. John Catsimatidis. How are you?
Hi, Frank. Good to see you.
How are you?
I'm on the national.
We're fighting for our country. We're fighting to make it to the year 2076. Because if we don't do it right, it won't be easy.
The only thing I can assure you is we won't be there for that.
I can assure you that too. So we're fighting for our kids and grandkids.
That's right.
You have to think for 7
Hopefully medical
generations.
science won't make leaps and bounds. I don't want to be there.
But yeah.
What were you talking about?
We are fighting to have our country make it to the year 2076, the 300th year of our country.
There you go. All right, everybody. I want to thank you all for joining with us for this conversation with Congressman Cole. Before I introduce our breakfast chairman, John Catsimatidis, let me just make a couple points about the Institute, and then I'd like to go around the table so that everybody can introduce themselves properly to my friend, the Congressman, and how unique it is for a Democrat to refer to a Republican congressman as my friend, but we are. We are.
It was always that way until the last 10, 15 years.
That's right. That's right. So for those of you who are unaware, the Cornell Institute of Politics and Global Affairs is a recognized academic entity at Cornell University. There are institutes of politics across the country. The one at Harvard is in the Kennedy School. There's one in Georgetown in Washington, D.C. One at the University of Chicago, which David Axelrod runs. And as of March 1st, the Cornell Institute of Politics exists in New York City, the only institute of politics in the entire region, based right here in New York City, Long Island, as well as Ithaca. And our mission is very simple. We deepen the discourse and we raise understanding. One of the frustrations I had as a member of Congress was we tend to talk in sound bites. In fact, there's an official designation for a type of speech that you give on the floor of the House. Tom knows this. It's called the 1-minute speech, where you get 1 minute to express a viewpoint. And you know, the world is volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous. You can't really get an understanding in that kind of environment based on a 1-minute speech or a snippet on Fox News or MSNBC or CNN. So what we do is convene intimate gatherings like this, where we can really hear from thought leaders, have a respectful dialogue, and understand those thought leaders and inform our own judgments. And we are very bipartisan. So some of you attended the event that we had with Speaker Pelosi several weeks ago. Tom is here today. On September 10th, we have Reince Priebus, who was Chief of Staff to President Trump, who will be discussing the dynamics inside the White House. So we have Congressman Adam Schiff here on June 17th. We also travel. Frank Delafair was with us, actually. We went to Egypt before the Cornell Institute was formally launched. We did geostrategic trips around the world. So we were in Egypt, Israel. We're thinking about a trip to Normandy in connection with the 75th anniversary, probably in the fall. And so we deepen understanding by traveling around the world. And then we do issues conferences based on the interest of our supporters, the Institute supporters, the Cornell faculty, students, and others. A word about Tom Cole, then I'll properly introduce John Catsimatidis. I'm frequently asked, in fact, the #1 question that I'm faced with since leaving Congress, Tom, is, do you miss it? Do you miss being in Congress? And I'll be honest, and I am honest when I hear that question. Mostly no. Mostly no. I don't miss most of what I experienced. But here's what I do miss, without any reservation. The quiet, bipartisan collegiality that you guys don't see on television, because that's just boring. Tom Cole and I established a relationship. Tom and I probably disagree on at least 50% of the issues, maybe more, at least. Okay, maybe 99% of the issues. But if you don't mind me saying, the beauty of the relationship that we have and others have is that we didn't get hung up on the 60% or 50% or the 70% where we disagree. We found the 40% or 30% or 20% where we could agree and just focused on those issues. So for example, when Hamas fired rockets from Gaza, and Todd Richmond is here, he's going to introduce himself momentarily, very active in the pro-Israel community. When Hamas fired rockets into Israel in 2013, and I was on the floor, I wanted to introduce a resolution affirming Israel's responsibility to defend itself. I found Tom Cole on the floor. I said, Tom, you're a conservative Republican, I'm a progressive Democrat. Can we do a resolution together on this? We did it, and it passed unanimously. And one of the reasons it passed was because people said, and I heard this on the floor, well, if Israel and Cole can agree on this, how can I disagree? I mean, there's no room to disagree on this when you can get Cole and Israel together. So I miss those quiet conversations. I miss the bipartisan relationship. And I'm happy to tell you that that actually is most of Congress. It's like an ocean in a storm. You see the frothing and the waves and the turbulence on the surface. But deeper down, it's actually a decent and civil place where quiet bipartisan conversations occur, which is why I'm so happy that Tom is here. Particularly because Tom and I shared kind of equal missions. I chaired the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee. He chaired the National Republican Campaign Committee. We were like two football coaches on opposite sides of the field, kind of understanding and empathizing with the difficulties of the moment. I can think of nobody better to chair this breakfast than my dear friend, Catsimatidis. He's one of those guys who needs no introduction, but for those of you who aren't aware of his stature, you know, he's a businessman, he's a talk show radio host. He's the owner, president, chairman, and CEO of Catsimatidis Foods, which is the largest grocery chain in Manhattan, and the Red Apple Group, which is primarily an energy company with real estate holdings worth $2 billion in New York, Florida, and Pennsylvania. He's also the chairman and CEO of the Red Apple Group subsidiary United Refining Company. I urge you, on Sunday mornings, I urge you to tune in to John's amazing radio show. You can hear it on a variety of stations from Tampa, Florida, all the way up north of New York City. I was privileged to do his show 2 weeks ago. He deals with thought leaders and delves into many of the pressing issues confronting us. And he was the runner-up in the Republican nomination for mayor of New York City in the 2013 election. Let's have a warm welcome for John Catsimatidis. John, it's all yours.
Thank you. I'm John Catsimatidis. I do a variety of things, and I was a Bill Clinton Republican, Democrat, wherever I was. But like many other people, like even the Bushes, I fell in love with Bill Clinton. Because I thought he was a common sense, straight out guy. And, my daughter then went on to marry a Republican. She married the President Nixon's grandson. So I became a little bit more of a Republican. But I think there's good issues on both sides. When I ran for mayor, I ran as a Republican liberal. You know what that means? That means I believe our streets should be safe. I believe that we should balance our budget. But also I believe that we should take care of the kids from the inner city before we take care of the kids from Central America. And I think that's important for us. I worked for Mr. Morgenthau for 34 years with the Police Athletic League, and we take care of the kids in the inner city. We 30, 40,000 kids we take care of. And I think that's very important. And one of the things I said before, we'll start here, is that my goal in the speech I gave, my daughter's Republican chair of Manhattan, and she's vice chair of the state. And before when I introduced her at her Lincoln Day dinner, which was honoring Donald Trump Jr., I said, my goal is for our kids and our grandkids to make sure our country gets to 2076, the 300th year of our country. And we are facing big dangers in the world. We're facing China, and people don't realize what a danger China really is. I love the Chinese people, but our love for them, it's a little bit different than their love for us. They are there to be one step ahead of us, not one step behind us. I'm not going to carry on, Venezuela, Iran. I'm also in charge for the Ecumenical Patriarch out of Constantinople, religious freedom in the world. The one thing I was annoyed at President Obama, under President Obama, was sitting down, 400,000 Christians died in the Middle East. And you don't see that in the New York Times. 400,000 Christians. And when President Trump got in, you know how many Christians died? Almost none. Almost none are getting their heads chopped off of him. Why? He's got his own peculiarities. And he's got a lot of peculiarities. But he terrorizes the terrorists. No terrorist will go against him or the United States of America, which I think is an important thing. Un from North Korea will not challenge him. The Chinese don't like him, but they're tiptoeing. The question is, the Chinese is a long-term players. They work for the next 50 years, next 100 years. The question is, did somebody wink at them and say, let's wait for a Democrat in 2020 that will have an easier deal than Trump? And I think that's dangerous for you. For us, the United States. I am proud to be here with Congressman Cole. You care about our country. You care about your background. You're part American Indian. Mm-hmm. So you really care about our country. You were here first.
Part of my family was.
Okay. And it's about protecting our country, protecting our people, and making sure our businesses get a fair deal in the world so we can create jobs. You can't have companies, and I run big companies. I run 5 companies. If I'm scared to do business under the wrong government in our own country, then Tom, tell everybody about yourself.
Forgive me for this, but
No,
with your permission, can we just go around the table so Tom knows everybody who's here,
Yeah.
and then we'll,
My name is Richard Weinberg. I'm a retired justice of the Supreme Court of the State of New York and General Counsel of the Catsimatidis.
I'm Nicholas Delafera. I work at Farrell Pharmaceuticals, manager of commercial product.
I'm Tom Allen, publisher and owner of City and State, and the media sponsor of Steve Israel.
Hi, I'm Jen Sutton. I'm the executive director of the Council for Secure America, which Congressman Israel and President Trump are co-chair along with Harold Kim, and it focuses on American energy independence and is a coalition between the pro-Israel community and the domestic energy producers.
Fred Zeidman. I'm currently serving as the co-chairman with Harold of the Council for Secure America. As the congressmen both know, I'm the poster boy for Republicans in Texas. And I was the chairman of the United States Holocaust Museum for 10 years. With Steve's dedication to bipartisanship and Congressman Cole as well. It's an honor to be here and work with him.
Todd Richmond, I'm a financial advisor at JP Morgan Securities. I'm the national co-chair with Van Lewis of a new organization called the Democratic Majority for Israel, which focuses on the rise of anti-Zionism within the Democratic Party. Also, one of the heads of Big PAC, which we're hosting a lunch for the Congressman later today. Unfortunately, I cannot be there. Steve, we missed you in Congress. And as we like to say, even though it was known as the Cole Israel resolution on that the thing with Gaza, we as the Democrats on Long Island like to refer to the Israel Cole.
I took Ravage.
Tricia Duff, I'm the founder of the Common Good. We do a lot of events that encourage engagement and education, bipartisan, on public policy and politics. And we would be very happy to welcome you to the Common Good one day. We've had Steve Israel a couple of times, of course. Thank you so much.
And you had me when I read you.
Absolutely, John. You were great today, by the way.
I'm Barnett Schechter, independent historian, focusing on the American Revolution and Civil War here.
And come on, I'm a fellow author. Shill your book.
Well, the way Steve and I met is Steve read my first book, The Battle for New York, and we've done a couple of wonderful tours together by bus on Long Island, exploring the battle, the largest battle of the Revolution, the Battle of Brooklyn, August 27th, 1776.
The Institute is planning actually a military history tour. We're going to Gettysburg, hopefully Normandy, and we're also going to include Barney to take us on a tour of the Battle of Long Island. It was phenomenal. It took about 6 members of Congress several years as well. It was great.
I'm Vanessa Adler. I work at a private equity firm. I run investor relations firm. I'm married to him. He's the interesting one.
Frank Delafera, founder of Fera Pharmaceuticals, and I enjoyed our trip to Egypt, Steve, and I recommend anytime Steve sets up another program, Normandy, we should all go
I'm a retired school psychologist. I've written 3 children's books that nobody bought. So this is my husband, Paul.
I'm Paul Workman. I'm a former hedge fund manager. I'm now a financial advisor. With Steve's help, I got active politics for the first time in my life. I've always been avoided, but I got active in the 2018 election because I thought it was the most important in my lifetime. I think the next one might even be more important. We'll talk about that too. I love that goal about reaching 2076. But I think it's a small, it's a modest objective. I want this country to go on forever.
Susan Rubenstein, I'm the board chair of Common Cause New York, and I'm the National Governing Board. I was a marketing consultant with my own business before that, and my background was all in political science. I finally decided to get involved in things that really meant something to me. So I'm doing that now, just about full time.
Frank Siami, a builder developer in New York City. Love Steve. My wife is a conservative Republican. I'm a Republican. But your name comes up quite often, Barbara. They're not all bad. And I think that it really allows me to believe that bipartisan is the way to go. And I'm glad to be here.
Stephen Lamoni, our Senior Foreign Policy Advisor at Amnesty International.
I'm Darcy Bradbury. I'm a partner in a global hedge fund where one of the things I do is I think about the impact of public policy on investments that we make.
I'm Zach Layden. I'm a Cornell alumnus. I previously did advanced work for the Obama administration. I now work at a marketing tech company called Zeta Global, and I'm helping with young alumni engagement for the Institute.
My name is Danielle DiVincentis. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer for a not-for-profit organization called Congress Foundation, where we're a rewilding organization working with America's wild horses, and we look to find available lands for them and create new legislative policies for them in Washington.
I'm Jack Martins. I'm a partner at Harris Beach, a former state senator, also a Republican here in New York State, and former constituent of Steve Israel.
And he was the guy, he was the Republican I feared the most, no kidding, in terms of running against me. He was the guy, I would hear these rumors and I would go, oh God, this is fun. So, thank you, Jack, for not running.
Bruce Blakeman, friend of Steve Israel, John Catsimatidis, great guys. I'm a councilman, 3rd District, town of Hempstead, America's largest township. And on behalf of the residents of the town of Hempstead, we extend our sympathy on the tough times that you're having in Oklahoma right now. We were reading about it this morning, so we hope your people are well.
Thank you very much. So he was referred by Time Magazine as the smartest, one of the smartest people in Washington, D.C., so this should be a treat. Let's give a warm welcome to Congressman Steve.
Steve, John, I appreciate it very much. Thank all of you for taking the time to come. And you asked me to give you the quick thumbnail version of who I am and how I got here. I actually began life to be an honest person. I was going to be an historian. Actually, I have a doctorate in British history. And I was had no intention of getting into politics, but my mother was very active in Republican politics as an organization, you know, precinct person, county committee woman, state committee woman, all that sort of stuff. And in 1976, when Oklahoma was very Democratic still, she was finally prevailed upon to run for office. And I was like most graduate students. I was writing my dissertation at the time, totally self-consumed. You know, that's what graduate students are supposed to be. And I did a few things in the campaign, but not very many. She lost very narrowly. And I mean, the worst place on the planet to be is your mother's watch party when she barely loses. I mean, the guilt is overwhelming. And I had watched the campaign enough to figure out her big problem was the classic problem that first-time candidates have. She tried to be the manager and the candidate at the same time. And I told her that later, and I said, you know, if you run again, I'd do this. And I never thought she would. I would have never made that commitment. Literally 2 years later, I'm on a Fulbright in London, and she calls and says, I'm running. When are you coming home? And she knew I was coming back in June, and so I got back. I went down to the department at the University of Oklahoma. I told them, look, I was teaching that summer European history courses at OU, and said, I'll teach the courses because I need the money, but I'm not going to work on my dissertation from now until November. I'm going to run this campaign the way I think it ought to be run. And they were actually very understanding about that, said that was fine, and she won. Became the first Native American woman to ever serve in the Oklahoma State Senate, and this is 78. Actually, she was in the State House for 3 terms, so it was House seat that time, but there weren't very many of them, and so I thought it was really pretty cool to run a campaign. I played football in high school and at college, and a watch party's a lot like a locker room after a game. You know, it's a bonding experience. You fought together, you fought for something you believe in and for someone you believe in, and you got a score. You know who won and lost. And so I love that. I just started running campaigns for fun. Be a school board here or something. And eventually a guy comes to me who I had actually played football with his son and wanted to run for county commissioner. I was busy on my dissertation, and I said, can you do this campaign? I said, well, Mr. Wilson, I'm pretty busy. He said, I'll pay you. I said, you can make money doing this? So I did, and about a year after that, the state party chairman called me up and said, why don't you take 1 year out of academic life, come be the executive director here in the state party. And I didn't know he peddled the job to 4 or 5 other people or what he wanted, but it sounded like really cool to me, so I did. And just never went back. There was always some political thing along the way. So I ended up running campaigns, working for a congressman, as the first a field rep and then a district director, a guy named Mickey Edwards out of Oklahoma. After that, ran Reagan's re-elect in Oklahoma, which was pretty easy, re-elect in Oklahoma. Then became the state chairman for a few years, did that. My mother retired from the state senate. I ran for that, won it. 3 years later, I got offered a job to come to the NRCC as the ED. The guy Vanderjack was a great guy. And so my mother had retired largely because my dad was ill, my grandmother was ill, was living with them. And she came out of retirement. Sadly, my father had been institutionalized. He had Alzheimer's. My grandmother died. And so we became the only mother-son, mother group in Oklahoma history. She went on and won another term, then finally retired. I just kept running campaigns, and then I have a business that does that all over the country. I don't get to do it anymore. I still don't get the revenue, and that's nice. And ended up becoming Secretary of State in Oklahoma during the Oklahoma City bombing. By the way, thank you guys very much. We got such remarkable help from New York. I met, frankly, your fire chief that then died on 9/11. It was just remarkable, though, the kind of support that we got out of New York, and frankly from all over the country. It really made me feel good to be an American. So I did that for 4 years, became Chief of Staff on the Republican National Committee in the 2000 cycle. Was bouncing around, making a lot of money, and all of a sudden one of my star clients, a guy named J.C. Watts, who's one of the few black Republicans in Congress, decided to hang it up and called me up and said, "You got to run. You're the only Republican that can win this seat." And I said, "There was no way I'm going to do it." And I was running for Congress. So, in Congress, I've focused partly on politics, a lot on Native American issues, some niche issues, but not very many people know much about. But the most important political relationship any Indian tribe has is with the federal government because of the trust responsibility. Ended up on a probe. Steve and I became good friends there, which is one of the last bipartisan bastions in Congress. At the end of the day, you got to work together. That's fun. Every year, I love that committee for that. And I'm working with Deputy Whip, so I try to put our side together and keep his side divided.
Which isn't that hard, by the way.
It's gotten easier this cycle, I got to tell you. It's interesting to watch before, but that's it in a nutshell. Basically what I do, and I did not intend to be. I've been in Congress now since 2002. It's a lot longer than I intended to be there, but I still find it an incredibly fascinating place to work. I mean, when you go on the floor and you look out onto the membership, I always say there's 435 different Americas there, and each one thinks they're the real America. It is interesting the complexity of the relationships that go beyond the partisan divide, everything from regional issues to issues of special interest or what have you, where people do come together. So, but I'd rather respond to questions or comments that you guys have.
Great. John, you want to start with some questions?
Yes, I mean, love for you to describe your district, and you're on the Rules Committee in Congress. Not everybody knows what the Rules Committee does. Why don't you start with that?
Okay, well, let me start with the district. The district is in south central Oklahoma, basically runs from Oklahoma City, southern part of it, down to the Texas border and along the Red River. I always say it's got about 13,000 farms and ranches, got about 20,000 producing oil and gas wells. It's got 2 gigantic military installations. The largest military air depot in the world is Tinker Air Force Base. And anything that goes boom is at Fort Sill. That's the home of the field artillery since 1911. Also now the air defense artillery. So it's a heavily military district. It's got 5 colleges and universities, including the University of Oklahoma, which is the state's flagship institution. 11 different Indian tribes who are big players. My own tribe employs 14,000 people, runs the largest casino in the world, sits on the Oklahoma-Texas border. But the other tribes are fairly substantial as well. So, heavily agricultural, military, energy type district with the unusual. Our tribes are, I'd say, ours 14,000 people, $3 billion annual income. It's like a huge corporate thing. Over half the Chickasaws in the world live inside that congressional district. So, in terms of the Rules Committee, I've been on it for a long time. I've had 3 different speakers asked me to serve, and now I'm a majority leader. The speakers asked me to serve during the majority, and it's called the Speakers Committee for a reason, and that's when you want to be on the Rules Committee, because basically it's a 9-to-4 split, with each person chosen either by the Speaker, 9-4, by the minority leader, whoever that is. So you're going to lose every vote 9-4 if you're in the minority. And the committee itself sets up the terms for debate. In other words, it decides, basically what amendments will be allowed, how long the debate will be, whether or not there will be points of order that can be lodged against the legislation. It does this in very close cooperation, obviously, with the Speaker and the Speaker's staff. The minority, you know, about the only thing you can do there is basically make the opening argument for your side. Maybe you can get some amendments made in order. Every now and then you can come at things a different way. I'll give you an example of the odd sorts of things you can do on the committee if you know what you're doing. When I first got there in 2005, we were in the majority, obviously, and I was there at Speaker Hastard's request. And I had a problem. In Oklahoma, we were trying to get a site for the USS Oklahoma Memorial in Pearl Harbor. And that's the second largest loss of life is on that ship. Over 420 sailors get killed. But everybody knows about the Arizona. Not very many people know about the Oklahoma. And the Navy, we were having a hard time. But, you know, it's an active naval base. They wouldn't give us the time of day. I actually attended a survivors gathering. They were tolling bells for all the guys that died the year before without saying the memorial. Now, there's got to be a way that I can do something. So I always carried the Defense Appropriations Bill and the Defense Authorization Bill. Hunter was chairman, and I went and asked him, can I slip? But you also develop the camaraderie. I mean, my Democratic counterpart, Jim McGovern from Massachusetts, great guy. And so it's one of these, hey, if you ever need an amendment that's specific to something you need, let me know. I will do that for you. And he would. And so there's a camaraderie amongst all committee members across the aisle. But this one is, again, not widely known, but extraordinarily powerful, but again, in conjunction with the Speaker.
Any questions?
Do you see Congressman anyway fully reward bipartisanship? It seems so poisonous.
We're getting down to the point.
Yeah, is there some way that we can really what's going on? It's just, I've been in politics for a very long time. It's very distressing to see what's happening.
It is, but you know, I don't think there's any magic answer. But I look at it this way. I don't think partisanship begins in Washington. It's out in the country. I mean, if things work their way up, people are electing the people that are coming up there. And you don't get any reward for being bipartisan. Usually, when President Obama was there, I mean, I have 5 pictures of Obama in my office. I don't think any other Republican can match that. I mean, to the point it used to worry the staff because he's great on Indian stuff. But I was also on compromises like fiscal cliff, which was a big compromise on the Bush tax cuts. So I was always willing to do that. And you got in a lot of trouble at home for dealing with somebody that, you know, I think in my district, I don't think the president ever broke 33%. So again, I will just tell you, the country has to decide it wants to do that and start rewarding people that actually participate in that, as opposed to punishing you. They all tell you they want to work together. The reality is most of them mean I want to work with the other side to get exactly what I want, not some compromise in between. So I think the fragmentation of the electorate by social media, you know, the cultural intensity that we have now on both the left and the right, where they each feel like they're under assault by the other, has made it extremely difficult to come together in large deals. And finally, you know, again, I don't think we've got the mentality for it right now. I think everybody between now and 2020 is thinking about 2020. I'll give you 2 recent examples. We recently passed a bill, literally 2 weeks ago, a big health care package, 7 different bills that came out of Energy and Commerce. 3 of them were totally bipartisan. They were related to drug pricing, and they passed unanimously out of the committee. 4 of them were very partisan. They had to do with sort of propping up the Obamacare state exchanges, which Republicans had all voted against. Rather than take the 3 and here's something we can pass, they were put with 4 others. So they get essentially no Republican votes. They go to the floor. You can pass it in the House, but it's going absolutely nowhere in the Senate. So, you know, from our standpoint, it looks as if the decision's been made by the Speaker. We're not going to do anything bipartisan. We're going to make issues that can become partisan. Some of that's very legitimate. Democratic majority ran on certain things. They feel obligated to bring those things to the floor. They should. They have to keep faith with their voters. But this wasn't something anybody ran on that you had to do. So again, right now, we're more into creating issues than we are into solving problems. We need an agreement right now as to what the spending caps will be for the next 2 years, and what are we going to do with the debt ceiling, which we'll run into in the fall sometime. Nobody's talking. There's not much going on. So leadership also has to decide that it wants to get stuff done as opposed to score political points. And right now, and I'm being very bipartisan, I don't think leadership on either side is thinking very much about getting stuff done. They're all thinking about how do we get through the next election, how do we create issues for the next election.
Tom, with all your experience and understanding and looking at being a historian of the UK, the different model of elections are so polar opposites. When you have an election, for example, for Prime Minister, it's a 6-week process, and that creates less division. I think our political landscape and the timing is multi-years of political hacking at each other for the next election. And could there be a way of utilizing what the Brits are doing, saying it's a 6-week process? You don't put your name in the hat until 6 weeks before the election. Maybe that's too short for the U.S., but a time period. And has that ever been discussed?
Yeah, it gets discussed a lot. I think, I'm not sure I would hold up Britain as the model for functionality.
No, but I'm talking about the major issues with the major parties.
Yeah, no, but I think Britain, is actually a good sign of the challenge. I mean, what makes the British system work differently than ours is, you really do have all executive and legislative power concentrated in a single branch, and you traditionally have much more discipline amongst the major two parties in terms of now 3, now 4, really, in terms of how they work together. Our forefathers, I think, feared concentrated power more than anything else. There's not another system in the world where you divide up between the House, the Senate, the executive branch. You elect them in different cycles, and you also have a judicial branch that's powerful enough to say, even if they get together and agree, well, I'm sorry, that's unconstitutional, we can kick it out. So it's very hard to get stuff done. It's meant to be very hard. I mean, if Madison could come back and look at this today, he'd go, God, this is wonderful. I mean, they really can't get very much done, and that's protecting the basic liberty of the American people. So our system is designed to make it difficult. I don't think we could come up with a system that you could get widely accepted. I look at the debate over the Electoral College, for instance, that's going on right now. A few years ago, most Republicans would have agreed to get rid of it. Now they see it as, well, that's an effort to undo the last election. So, the debate over everything has become extraordinarily partisanized. It makes it very difficult to do it. So I don't think there's a magic system. I think the challenge is in the DNA of our politics right now.
Do you think a 6-year term? Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. I mean, I just think of anything as a businessman, just wrapping your arms or becoming chairman of an organization, not for profit. It takes a year or two to just get up to speed. And here you are, president. You got 2 years to start to wrap and now you're running another election. Congress is even worse. I mean, would a 6-year term make sense?
For a president?
For a president.
No, I don't. Again, Confederacy tried it. Didn't work there. But I really am skeptical. I actually think the election creates actually an incentive to get things done, and sometimes it can be either way. You have to have something to run on. I think this is one of the problems the Democrats have right now. It's why I would argue they need an infrastructure bill or a drug pricing bill or something, because all the things that we're talking about right now are things that the left loves, and they can pass in the House, and that's fine, but the people that love, let's say, Medicare for all, the Green New Deal, or what have you, good luck with that. I mean, those are all coming from voices that are districts that are heavily Democratic. If you look at this new Democratic majority, and you got a member from Houston, a member from Dallas, a member from Oklahoma City, a member from the southern New Mexico oil patch. You think any of them want to run on the Green New Deal? I don't think so. So again, in terms of the time limit, I don't remember most members are not in the situation of the ones we're talking about here. Most of them are going to get reelected. 80–90% of these people are not running serious campaigns, and they're more focused on the primary because their seat isn't all that competitive. So once you get in, Steve was actually in a competitive seat, but we never came really close to beating him. I mean, excellent member, and the people even in the competitive seats are usually pretty good. That's the point. They're competitive, and they have to beat really good people, and they know it. They stay.
So Tom, that leads to term limits, piggybacking on 6 years in Congress.
Well, actually, let's go to Paul.
So I had a question about, Madison and the other founding fathers created this Constitution, and an important part of the Constitution, seems we all agree, was separation of powers. Congress is supposed to provide checks and balances against the executive. That seems to be lost in this current administration. It doesn't seem like the Senate does. There's no such thing as checks and balances anymore.
Well, I think they're there, but they're not as strong as they used to be. You're right about that. And, but I didn't see a lot of checks on President Obama or President Clinton either. I think
that's not a defense. Maybe it didn't start.
I'm not trying to defend. I'm just trying to explain. I mean, I think this is eroded now, and it's eroding at an accelerating pace. But I still think if you think we're all just instruments that automatically vote with the president, ask the presidents that. They don't see it that way. And let's just take the Trump budget, dead on arrival, and Republicans would kill it faster than Democrats will. So there's still a lot of tension there, but when you go after the executive, you're right, there's not as much institutional resistance as there used to be. And I regret that, but I think, again, that's more a reflection of what's going on in the country right now.
Councilman, and then we're going to work our way around the table. Just so you know, we have to end the Q&A at about 10:15. Those of you who would like some photographs with Congressman Cole are invited to join us at the step and repeat. Let's go to the councilman.
Congressman, it seems that the Chinese typically make their decisions with a long view, whereas it seems that Americans base their decisions on election cycles. Who's going to blink first in the negotiations with respect to tariffs between China and the United States?
Well, I think John actually probably cuts the key point. I think the Chinese probably aren't convinced yet that the president could be reelected. So I think they feel like they have time. And this is a battle, by the way, that affects like my district a lot. If you're an ag district, it's not a good thing for you. If you're a district if you're an oil and gas district, metals tariffs are a big deal. The cost of everything from pipe to drilling equipment. If you're an aeronautics district, which we are because of my largest employer, State Air Force, they have 16,000 federal employees and then a ton of contractors. So anything that affects the cost of metal is a big deal. So a lot of these, this war, trade war, is actually being fought at the expense of Trump supporters by and large, as opposed to Trump opponents. And I think they're holding surprisingly tough. I mean, I can take you to farmers and tell you how much money they've lost, but I'm still with Trump. I think that you really need to stand up to the Chinese. And, if it's framed in that kind of thing, I think he can do it. But what the next president does will be interesting to see if it's not this one, because Trump trade policy is basically Democratic trade policy. It's not classic, Republican free trade stuff. I mean, even Bernie Sanders had to issue a statement when Trump got out of the TPP, Trans-Pacific Partnership negotiations. And Senator Schumer recently was praising the president for standing up to China. So, again, Trump trade policy, I think, looks more like Bernie Sanders' trade policy than it was George W. Bush's trade policy. We'll see whether or not he's there. But my guess is the Chinese will wait for a while. I don't think they're in a hurry to get to a deal. But I also think the president's right when he says they have a whole lot more to lose than we do. I mean, he's still got a range of options as to what he can do in terms of goods that are coming from China into the United States that he has not yet deployed. They don't have any options left. They basically are already putting tariffs on everything that we sell. Our economy is doing better than their economy. If you were going to take on the Chinese, this was the right time to do it. And the thing I find about Trump that's interesting was actually, we got four great looks into the Trump administration. You've got Michael Wolff's, Fear and Fury book. You've got Woodward's Fear book. You've got a guy named Cliff Sims who worked in the White House, Team of Vipers book, and you got the Mueller report. And you can argue which stories are true or not true, but they all paint broadly the same picture. The sort of chaotic, center. This is the way the guy operates. He clearly does. But one of the interesting lines is a long story in the Sims book, which I found really surprisingly good, was Donald Trump I wondered how he could take the constant barrage of criticism. And it's because, when he thinks he's right, he'll weather any storm to go through it. And I would actually argue, in his very unconventional way, he's basically doing the things he told you he was going to do. That's one of the reasons why he's hated so much, is that he will follow through on what he said. One of the classic constitutional confrontations, to your point, is over the border wall. Well, he fought it out, shut down the government over it, and went around it to complete, try to complete what he promised he would do. I happened to be with him 6 days before the movement of the embassy from Israel, from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem in Israel. And I'd been invited down because he was doing a big conference in the Oval Office praising the Navajo code talkers. Since I'm Native American, I'm supposed to show up, so down we come. And the president, this wonderful ceremony, although only a politically insensitive White House would praise Native Americans under a picture of Andrew Jackson. I was brought up to hate Andrew Jackson. My great-great-grandfather, had to walk 800 miles because of him to Indian Territory. There they are, and I'm just, oh my God. But he actually does a pretty good job in the deal, and we had this 90-year-old code talker get up. He's supposed to say something for a couple minutes. He gave one of the most powerful 15-minute speeches I've ever seen. And then Trump is standing there with his notebook, getting ready to deliver his remarks. He turns to this guy, hands him the notebook, and he says, "Everything you said is in this notebook. And you said it so much better than anybody." It was actually very moving, and it's going well, and it's like, wow. I mean, where's this Trump? I never seen this Trump. And then he goes, and to think you were fighting for our country, and you were the first ones here, and the way you've been treated, and nobody in Congress, and then a little light goes off. Oh, there is one person in Congress, and we're off to Pocahontas, and that becomes the story. Yeah.
You thought it was you.
No. Yeah, I did for a minute. But, so the National Press Corps is all going berserk. They're all in the Oval Office. And the president leaves the stage and goes to this little conference room that's off the Oval Office. And I'm looking here, I know who the next guy they're all coming to. And fortunately, Kelly comes running out. This is when he was chief of staff, General Kelly, and says, "Congressman," and I was with Jeff Denham, said, "Can you come back here? The president would like to visit with you and Congressman Denham over the tax bill that's still hanging fire. This is December of 2017. So I fortunately escaped back there. And Trump is talking to General Mattis, Secretary Mattis at that point, to General Dunford, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and Kelly had been part of this. And we don't know what they're talking about, but Mattis gives us one of these, what the hell are these guys doing here looks. But they're talking about moving the embassy. And he doesn't want to talk about that in front of a couple of congressmen because he thinks that's all going to be spilled out in the press. But the president just persisted and said, "Now, tell me again, Mr. Secretary, why you think this is a bad idea." And Mattis says, "Well, actually, Mr. President, we finally have the Arabs and the Israelis working together against the Iranians. We think this will disrupt that. We think there's a real chance of real riots in Jerusalem with Palestinians. Even the Israelis keep their defense ministry in Tel Aviv because they don't want to risk that kind of corruption. I just don't think it's a very good idea." And so Trump's listening to all this and says, "But, I promised people I would do this." 6 days later, he did it. 3 other presidents have made the same promise. So, like him or not, and I don't say this to defend his policies, because there's a lot of them that I don't agree with, but he is pretty determined to try to accomplish the things that he ran on, and it'll be very unconventional. You look at the government shutdown going into that. you know, in December, if you really know what happens, I mean, we've had the most successful appropriations cycle last year we had in 22 years. 75% of the government's funded on time in September. There's 7 bills left. They constitute about $330 billion of spending in a $1.3 trillion discretionary budget. 6 of them are basically written. They're agreed to. We can pass them immediately. That's what we should have done. We got back. And there's one fight over one part of Homeland Security. It's the wall. $5.7 billion item and 300 plus. And, you know, what the Speaker-elect is, after the election, a pretty difficult spot herself. She can't look weak. She, you know, she has not secured the votes yet to be Speaker. So this fight continues. We get to, if you remember, then Leader Pelosi actually said, well, you don't even have the votes, Mr. President, to pass this stuff in the House yourself. Well, that was, as a whip, I can tell you there's nothing like having the other side go, nah, 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 you can't get it done. I mean, that really helped. And so we got it done. It got passed out of the House, goes to the Senate. Majority of the people in the Senate will do this, but Schumer's got enough votes, obviously, to keep us from getting to 60. And so really, it's a Democratic decision to shut down the government. In that time frame, the president offers a split, he sends the vice president up to the hill and goes, let's split the difference. How about 5.7? Let's settle for $2.5, $3 billion. Normally, that's what you would do. But the Speaker-elect is not in a situation where she can do that. That's going to look like Katie. She's still got to get the 218 at this point, and she does not yet have that vote. You know, Trump said, well, you know, my lawyers tell me I can go around you guys, and I could do it. And so we stumble into the shutdown. You know, I was surprised we did that because Schumer had done exactly the same thing a year earlier. But you have to hand it to Republicans. When they do something stupid, they are really stubborn about it, so they stay right with it. So for 35 days, we lived through a partial government shutdown. At the end of the time, the president can see that this isn't working finally, and says, okay, you guys, I'll reopen the government for 3 weeks. You negotiate something, bring it to me, and we'll see if it's good enough. We do. We get 1.4 billion. That's not zero, which is what the Speaker's original position was, but it sure as hell isn't 5.7. So he says, takes it, says, thank you very much. Now I'm going to declare a national emergency, and we're going to keep building it. So you can argue with the policy or not, but is this a president, you know, pushing at every lever that he's got to try and achieve the things he ran on? Yeah, it really is.
So you ran on Mexico.
Let's do this so that we can try and get everybody in.
That?
No, but
exactly.
I think, Steve,
yes,
I think one of the most important things that is going on in this country is we have ordinary judges, federal judges all over the country, interpreting what the president can do and can't do. And is that the job of an ordinary federal judge?
It's the issue of the nationwide injunction.
Yeah.
As opposed to the localized injunction.
Let me just...
Well, our hands are not completely clean here. It's not like we didn't do the same strategy of getting Republican attorney generals and finding Republican judges.
Just as a matter of housekeeping, so we can try and get everybody in before the clock hits its mark. So raise your hand if you have a question, and I'm just going to jot these down. So we have Dick, Judy, Susan, Darcy, Jack. All right. Lieutenant Governor Radich.
Obviously, Trump presidency is more than a classic conservative liberal initially in politics. If it should turn out that there is a growing amount of incontrovertible evidence about how to violate criminal laws, whatever, including using laundry Russian money to Deutsche Bank. All of this, where the evidence would be overwhelming. Do you think that it's possible the Republican Party, there would be enough Republicans who might say they don't want him to have
I think a lot of it will depend on the clarity of the evidence and how. Look, every day that goes by, you're less likely to impeach because you're moving closer to the point where the American people will make the decision. And I think probably the president got through the most difficult part with the Mueller report itself. I mean, the no collusion thing, I think, was probably the big one. You're not going to convert or impeach somebody on obstruction charge to a crime that never occurred. And that you can certainly be critical of the president's behavior, although I actually believe the Attorney General said basically somebody really doesn't need to be mad or not. And restraining his impulses. So I think it's going to be difficult. To your point, it's not a classic. It's changing, I think, all through the Western world right now. It's sort of populist, nationalist, and you see Brexit, you see it in a lot of the European countries right now. We're not immune from the currents that are moving through the Western world right now. We're part of that in our own unique way to express it. Politics is very different. The House is very different than what I want. The regionalization, balkanization of American politics. When I got elected in 2002, there still were dozens of real blue dog Democrats around the country. And there were still dozens of real moderate Northeast Republicans. I always point to, look, right next door to me in Arkansas, they had 4 members, 3 of them were Democrats, and both senators were Democrats. They're all Republicans today. They're very conservative. There were still Democrats north of Dallas in rural parts of Texas. They're all Republican today. Connecticut, or the biggest Republican delegation was California, 22, 24 members, something like that. 7 left today. The same man, Connecticut, 3 of the 5 were Republicans. They're all Democrats today, and they've survived 2 wave elections where you would think if you could get something back, it would be in a 2010 or a 2014 type election. So the country really, and the red parts of America are a lot redder than they used to be. The blue parts of America are a lot bluer as well, and you see that in the distribution of power. So that actually makes it harder. There aren't very many people on our side, particularly after the last election, that are in swing seats where it would be to their advantage to try and establish that level of independence. They're mostly now in very red seats where, Justin Amash, let's take him as an example. Justin's a good guy, and I don't have any doubt that he's saying what he thinks, but I also don't have much doubt that this is probably his last term in Congress in that district too. So we'll see, but it's got to be crystal clear. And I'd say the way the Mueller report was written, the fact that there was no collusion, nobody really debates that much anymore. You're down to an obstruction issue where he didn't draw the thing, and where the Attorney General or Deputy Attorney General says this doesn't rise to the level of being charged. People are going to then hide behind that, if you will, not hide behind it, but take that's good enough. If we've got Attorney General saying there's not an impeachable offense here, and we've got Mueller saying there's no collusion here, you'd have to see something now new, I think.
My question was, what if there were growing evidence that was hard to argue with the violating criminal statutes, not having nothing to do with politics?
Yeah, well,
those of us who have something to carry,
well, again, I think it would depend on what it is, but it would have to be graphically clear. I mean, Steve and I were talking about this earlier. Personally, I think the speaker's giving her side very good advice right now. Don't do this. We got a guy we probably can beat in the next election. I mean, he probably want to look at over 50% say, well, I don't know who I'm voting for, but I'm not willing to vote for his re-election. Now, strangely enough, all the historical models we have all suggest if the economy stays like it is, he will get re-elected. So we're in very different political territory than we've been before. But I would say plunging the country into an impeachment crisis that will paralyze everything for 18 months and have very little prospect of being successful. I don't know.
If he stole $1 million from Dick Lavin from the real estate business, is that an impeachable offense? It's not national security.
Probably
not.
It's not. You would have to wait till. You would have to wait till after.
The word impeachment, a dead set against impeachment. I asked whether or not the evidence comes out violating criminal statute, might the Republican come in and assuming there's a decline in the coal, might the Republican decide they don't want him to head the ticket in 22?
You know, they might, but the Republican base would have to be convinced of that. And it's like 80. His number among Republicans are better than George W. Bush's were right after 9/11 amongst Republicans. So until you get some crack out there in that base, you're not going to have a bunch of people in Washington, D.C., deliberately picking a fight with their own primary voters. I don't see it.
Hey, Judy.
I'm a psychologist. Aren't you concerned about the stable genius having a nuclear code?
I'm really not, and I'll tell you why. Because he's actually more risk averse than the last two presidents have been in terms of deploying military force. And you've seen this recently in the last few weeks, where basically he's been in an argument with Bolton and Pompeo about, hey, I don't want to pick a fight with Iran. I do not want to show down with Iran. This is a guy who wanted to pull out forces out of Syria far earlier than any of the military people want to do. So, there's a lot of talk, there's a lot of bluff, there's a lot of bluster, but do I think he's dangerous? No. And as a matter of fact, again, read the Sims book. Also read his reaction to the first American that dies in combat during his presidency.
Okay, one more quick question.
Very quick.
Your state is feeling the impact of climate change, I believe. Where are you on that?
Well, I believe in climate change. It's usually the solutions that I have a problem with. And so, we're also an oil and gas state, and that's nobody believes in my state you're going to get rid of carbon-based energy. And we're also a big wind state, so we are into renewables as well. So, I'm all for doing things that I think are practical. I'm not for doing things that literally lower the standard of living of the average American. And so, tell me what those things are. One of those things has been wind. We now get 33% of our power from wind generation in Oklahoma, a classic oil and gas state. So, again, those kinds of solutions, I'm all for tax incentivizing those things. I'm all for trying to confront the problem. I think corporate America is actually doing a lot more. You can look at what our greenhouse emissions were now versus a decade ago, or what have you. But I think there's going to have to be more technological breakthroughs. I don't think you're going to find any politician seriously that undermines the living standards of the voters that he or she represents.
Okay, we're going to go to Susan and Darcy.
I have a question. Listening to you and Steve discussing before, you said you found things that you could compromise on. I want to know, were there any situations when you thought you had a really different view, and because of talking to each other, either one of you, that you changed where you stood before?
Well, I never changed Steve's mind. I can tell you that. But he probably knows more about Indians than he knew before he got there. So a lot of times, there's a wonderful saying Will Rogers from my state used to have, which is we're all ignorant only about different things. And one of the things you find out in Congress is how ignorant you are immediately, because you're voting on stuff you have no earthly idea about, no real life experience with. And the experience even of your constituency is very different than the experience of a constituency in another part of this really incredibly complex and vast country. So quite often you get educated and you find things through there that you can agree on. Yeah, I've certainly changed my view, for instance, on Iraq, knowing what I know now, knowing what I knew in 2002, where we literally, when we showed up, were given intelligence that I'm not saying this was deliberate, but was clearly flawed. Going in. So I'm probably a lot more, like the president, a lot more hesitant to deploy American military force than I used to be. And I give my Democratic colleagues a lot of credit for that because, about 80 odd of them voted, to go to war in Iraq, but the majority did not. And about half the Democratic senators did not. And I think their judgment was a better judgment. And, looking through history, backwards, but you go with the information you have at the time. I wasn't there for the October 2002 vote. I was thankful that I wasn't, but I'm always honest enough to say, had I been, I would have been voting for President Bush on that issue. So you do, over time, learn some things. And yeah, when you run a committee, I was chairman for 4 years of Labor, Health and Human Services, and Education. It's the largest domestic spending deal. We had flat funded the National Institute for Health for a dozen years. And then, by the way, it was Republicans that doubled it back in the Gingrich era. We've now increased funding there by 40%. It's been an enormously bipartisan effort. We've quadrupled Alzheimer's funding for good reason. It's the most expensive disease that we have. We have no answer. Those are the bipartisan issues that have really put together. So you learn a lot of things. You don't change the core principles. I know very few members that do that. But I do see members as they learn and build relationships, and you figure out pretty quick. I always tell people, Congress is a small town. There's 435 people. Everybody knows who ties the church. Everybody knows who gives the those guys. Everybody knows who will own their lawnmower. Everybody knows who will bring the lawnmower back. And so pretty quickly, you know, okay, on this one, I trust that person. They all bring special credibility. Obviously, if you served together with a guy named John Klein, 25-year Marine, flew Marine One for both Presidents Carter and President Reagan. He got up and talked about military stuff. I think I'm going to listen to him a lot more than I'd listen to somebody else. I'm talking about more of this in Congress. It's only been since the beginning of the Republic, 16 Native Americans served, and 8 of them from Oklahoma. So we will have a lot of impact on the other side of the aisle, not just mine, but on that issue. I know it's like that. You also look at who will break with their own side on something. My side's quite often wrong on Native American issues, in my opinion. And so I will. And that adds to credibility. So over time, which voices do I want to listen to, both within my caucus and more broadly within Congress? And the members, every day you create an image of who you are. You are wise. That's why all these pundits trying to guess who's going to win caucus contests, they have no idea. If you're not in the middle of that body, and when you get out of it, you pretty quickly lose touch with it, too. You just don't know. It's small group dynamics at one level, and it's really incredibly important.
I'm just going to go ahead.
How much of a role do you think you have in educating your constituents and regarding these things in Congress?
A lot. I think that's one of the things that I do a lot of town halls. I'm pretty visible. But for instance, I voted for Parks, which was not very popular any place in America, but was real unpopular in a place that had nothing to do with the basic forces that unleashed this. And I voted for it. We had it twice, failed once, and I voted for it both times. But as soon as I did, our calls were running like 15 to 1 against doing this. I immediately gave a press conference, did a video deal with the Oklahoman, which is our largest news outlet. And as soon as I got home, I scheduled meetings in every chamber of commerce, any place I could go to go explain my vote. I don't know if I changed their minds, but I gave enough of a case that I could survive future primaries, which I've had over this issue. So yeah, you can change your people's minds, and it's one of your jobs. I take almost all the media interviews that I get because I think part of your job is to explain what the hell is going on in this place, at least from your point of view.
Before we go to Darcy, let me just very briefly pick up on your first question. I don't know about you, but my favorite place in the Capitol is this place called the Members Balcony.
Yeah.
It's right off the floor of the House. So Tom and I could be beating each other up we could be beating each other up on a particular issue on the floor, and then we would just meander out to the Speaker's balcony. It's 30, not the Speaker's balcony, the Members balcony, right? Maybe 30 feet off the floor. We could just sit down, and full confessions, he and I have a vice. We smoke cigars. We could smoke a cigar. And it was never, and never has been, in my experience, a matter of changing somebody's mind. It's a matter of understanding where they're coming from. And so the great value of bipartisan dialogue was always this. I would say, can you do this? Can you vote for this? And the response was usually, no, I can't. But the more valuable add-on was, and here's why. I can't do it because of something at home. I can't do it because I just don't agree. I can't do it for whatever reason. Once you understand motivations, it becomes a much more productive environment. And that's the true value of bipartisanship.
To give you a good example of that, look, I played a key role in getting the Violence Against Women Act approved. The Senate had changed it substantially, came to the House. A lot of our members didn't agree with the changes. One of the changes was to provide a degree of jurisdiction of non-natives committing crimes against women on native. They couldn't arrest them, they couldn't do anything, they had no legal status over a non-native. And that was fixed with the agreement. So I got a lot of Republicans, and we voted down the Republican bill on the House floor, and then passed a Senate bill and moved it over. So I'm at the signing ceremony, and Majority Leader Hoyer, then Whip Hoyer, walks over and says, "Hey, Tom, I'm working on this gun control deal with Mike Thompson. You think you'd be interested in that?" I said, "No." And he goes, "Well," but I said, "Denny, I'll lose my seat." That's all I had to say. I got it. You're more valuable to us on some of these other things. Don't worry about it. But the point is, in my district, about half the households own firearms. I mean, when I did tours in after Sandy Hook, I went to a lot of schools. I mean, I had a lot more kids worried about that they would lose their ability to hunt than I did worried about their physical safety there. So I don't say that anything other than members like instantly know, okay, I get where this guy's coming from and I understand, but here's where I can find a place to work. And you can find a place to work with almost anybody on something if you'll do it. That's a great thing about appropriations. Because again, it's something that has to get done. It's a split the difference kind of deal. We all know Rosa DeLauro is my Democratic counterpart. One fellow member once said, "You guys are the odd couple." I mean, you look like a Republican, she looks like a Democrat. I mean, but 4 times in a row, we've come to a deal with the largest domestic spending. I think that she was comfortable enough that she voted for final passage. So, clearly we found areas, National Institute of Health, early childhood education, first-generation college student health, where we could find things we could work together on and avoid the Obamacare fights and the abortion fights or whatever.
Darcy Bradbury and then Senator Martins will be our final question.
In keeping with this whole optimistic, maybe there's some bipartisan under the surface. You mentioned prescription drug costs, and the president talks about that a lot, and his Medicaid folks have been working on something. The Senate just put together a bipartisan bill. Is there anything that can help people around this question between now and the election, or is it just...
No, I think actually there can be but the dilemma is a Democratic dilemma. It's not a Republican dilemma. I mean, we would be happy to, again, we had something we thought was bipartisan that would have been good, and the president and the Senate would have done. But do you want to give Donald Trump an accomplishment? And unfortunately, you can't get anything done in divided government without giving the other guy an accomplishment. You got to have their fingerprints on this as well. And but we wrestled with this with President Obama, and now that my Democratic friends wrestling with President Trump. And so there's clearly some people that don't want to give him anything. That would say, hey, well, in 2020 we'll beat this guy. But that puts off the nation's business. And I'm a big believer in incrementalism. Most progress on appropriations is really incremental and cumulative. You do a little here, a little here, a little here, and you move broadly in a direction you agree on. So if Democrats want to do that, they have a very unconventional, president on trade. One of the big issues in front of us now is this U.S. Canada-Mexico trade agreement. That's a tough issue for the speaker because the majority of our people will vote no. And when Steve and I were there, we were there 2 years at a time. If you're a speaker, you have your job in 24-hour increments. I mean, 50 people can call a special conference, or somebody go down the floor and file a privileged motion, and you can be out of it. So they're very cautious for good reason, and particularly this new Democratic conference, which is very volatile. I mean, it is. When we focus on Trump, what most political observers are missing are the divisions that are new divisions within Democratic ranks, and they're very difficult for the speaker to manage.
Senator, final question.
Thank you. 435 members of Congress, about probably 10% of those seats are competitive. Is that about right?
Yeah,
So
there may
every
be 20 in this new era.
so every 2 years, the country is fighting over literally 40 or 50 seats across the country because everyone else is either deeply red or deeply blue. And I happen to think that that's where, you're absolutely right. When you said that Congress is a reflection of the country, those districts are a reflection of what we have in Congress today. The fact that if you're in a deep red district, the only way you're going to lose is if somebody primaries you on the right, and if you're in a deeply blue district, the only way you're going to lose is if somebody primaries you on the left, which gives greater power to the fringes as against the center. I see that as the challenge of our current politics, not only in the United States, but obviously here in New York as well. And I'd love your thoughts, both of you, on how do we make our country more purple and less red and less blue. How do we do that?
I don't know if I've got a magic answer for you, but you have one of the preeminent examples right here, obviously, with my friend, our friend, Joe Crowley-Law. Here's a guy that from a district standpoint, you ought to want to keep because he's a potential future speaker, he's a powerful member, he's an important guy. And it did him absolutely no good in terms of holding. So status in Washington doesn't translate very well back home. Accomplishment in Washington right now doesn't, translate very well back home. So again, the electorate's going to have to decide whether or not it wants to keep fighting cultural wars. Now, I think the way you do this is you just do your job. At the end of the day, I didn't come to Congress to be in Congress. I came to Congress, I was with Steve, to get some things that I thought were important done for the country. And I can work or to react in an emergency, like a TARP or something, in a way that's bipartisan, and we can put together the votes to respond. But it also requires presidential leadership. Presidents are having an increasingly hard time, be they George Bush, Barack Obama, or Donald Trump, getting much help from the other side. Those are three very different styles, and yet the amount of help they got on the other side, particularly after the invasion of Iraq. I mean, you actually had some bipartisan accomplishments, attack to No Child Left Behind, we can debate the merits, but those were big bipartisan victories in the early Bush year. The seminal decision to go into Iraq and the polarization that had in the country, I think it's now, I'm not saying it started there, but that's sped it up. And again, when a president, I remember once getting a call from the ledge director for President Obama. I don't know if I ever told you the story or not, but we kept it secret. So he says, this is after fiscal cliff, where we've come to a big compromise, and I was a big arguer. Look, we're going to have to raise taxes on the top 2 or 3% to secure these tax cuts for everybody else. And we delivered, and I get this call from the White House, and would you come down and sit down with President Obama for 30 minutes, just one-on-one? And I said, are you kidding me? Of course I do. That's the President of the United States, but what the hell for? Well, the boss said, you're the only guy that we're listening to that seems to make any sense, so maybe you can explain the rest of us, our guys down there, what's going on. But again, this will sound critical of the president. You do have to work it, which, by the way, this president does more than either of the last two. But the first time that John Boehner ever talked to President Obama one-on-one, after he was Speaker. In other words, he'd been there 2 years as leader, and the President of the United States had not bought it. First time he ever flew on Air Force One with the President of the United States, when he went down after Charleston, the awful murders in the African-American church that we had down there. Now, if you're President of the United States, you should want members on Air Force One. You own Air Force One. You are the center of everything. And it's the most awesome platform to talk to a member. We're not doing very much at the White House levels to reach out and build bipartisanship. And maybe their argument would be because there ain't much built.
And I would just add, as a supporter of President Obama, that was the beef among Democrats. There were Democrats who didn't get into the White House with President Obama. Forget flying on Air Force One. Just get into the White House. Other than the congressional barbecue, which had 3,000 people. Until the day I left, there were still Democrats who never had a meeting with President Obama in the White House. And I promise you, they say politics, it's never personal, it's business. No, just the opposite. It's always personal. You can do any business once you figure out the personal. And that was I think, a deficiency of President Obama. in not developing more relationships with members of Congress. So, listen, guys, we're running a little bit behind. If you are interested, June 17th, Congressman Adam Schiff will be here. In July, we're doing a simulation of a nuclear crisis on the Korean Peninsula, co-chaired by your colleague, Congressman Waltz and Congressman Malinowski. September 10th, a conversation with Ryan Priebus. We'll be doing a conference on Roosevelt Island, the Cornell Tech campus on Roosevelt Island, on how different political messaging resonates in the brain. There's this new intersection of neuroscience and political science that is fascinating. We'll be discussing that. For those of you who are interested, if you want to join our board of founders or become founding members, we would invite you to do so. Just contact Devin, whose email is below. If you'd like a photograph with Congressman Cole, please join us there. And let's give Congressman Cole and John Catsimatidis a big round of applause.